Perfect. Whatever
So,
works for you.
yeah, good. And so anyway, we have a couple more minutes. I'll just let people scroll in
Okay.
before we do that. Did you have a good trip to New York?
Yeah, no, it was great. I had, we raised some money. It was fun to play golf and then went off to Belgium of all places for a couple of days. Rarely am I able to do kind of 3 days in a row of just not campaign stuff, which was great. But as you'll hear me say, like I've literally been on the road 25 days a month for 2 years. And it's been crazy. I think I underappreciate all the time about especially Democrats since they represent dense areas,
Yep.
how rare it is to actually spend a night, let alone 20 nights a month on the road. So it's been kind of wild, but it's been good, and I'm glad to be back here for a little bit. And are you out in Rye most of the summer then, or all year round, or
Yeah,
travel here
yeah,
and there?
I'm here all year round, although my wife and I are taking a couple weeks, and we're going to be in Europe for a couple weeks. So
Oh, that's great. Well, Rye is a beautiful place to be in the summer, as you know. So
definitely. So,
here's a road.
um, why don't we get started now then? So you talked a little bit about being on the road a lot, and that what is most amazing about, well, actually, let me introduce you. Adam Frisch, former council member for the city of Aspen, and obviously a congressional candidate in 2022. You nearly beat Lauren Boebert by 534 votes, I think it was. You needed a few more people, but nonetheless, it was a tremendous showing in a race that I think most analysts thought Boebert was going to win by double digits, and you nearly knocked her off. And you then proceeded to, and I think almost immediately announced your second run for the seat, and you kind of ran her out of the district. She left. But let's talk about the district. Colorado's third congressional district is amazing. It's one of the, I think it's the eighth least populated districts, in underpopulated districts in Congress. And as you were just telling me, it requires an awful lot of time on the road in your truck, probably.
Yeah, no, listen, it's great to be here. Happy summer, happy Monday, everyone, and thanks for showing some interest. Our couple things, our district's half the size of Colorado. It's larger than the entire state of Pennsylvania. And it takes me 12 hours to drive from point to point, which the highlight of my campaign and probably my life was last summer or in the summer and fall of 22, my son who just graduated from high school, Felix, he was 16 at the time, he took his junior of high school off, and we ended up doing a 25,000-mile father-son road trip. I'm home about 4 or 5 days a month, and it's been like that for almost 2 years, minus a couple months off in November, December, January, when we were kind of thinking about what to do. I'm going to make an argument. It's the most beautiful district. We have we have all of the Utah border. We have a third of the Wyoming border. We have Aspen, Telluride, Crested Butte. We also have Pueblo and Grand Junction. We have 27 counties. We have counties that are 85% Democrat, and we have counties that are 85% Republican. We have counties that are some of the wealthiest counties in the country, and we have some of the least well-off counties in the country down along the New Mexico, Colorado border. And the last thing I'll give, and I'll turn it back over, the registration, our registration is 22% registered Democrat, 22%, 32% Republican, and about 45% independent. And so, as I told the Democratic Party, if we have a 200% turnout, we're not winning. My mom calls it the pro-normal party coalition that we've been building.
So when you're driving around, you're with your son, 25,000 miles. Obviously you were an elected official in the city of Aspen. What did you learn about your district? That's a big district. You must have learned
Yeah.
quite a bit.
We've collected about 52,000 miles, and I feel like I've done a 50,000-mile focus group. I think I've talked to as many people, especially non-Democrat or non-owned party people out there. And I've learned a tremendous amount. First of all, it's humbling to be out there and meeting all these great people. On the upside, I will tell you that it's not hokey. I do believe that 80% of us agree on 85% of the same stuff, or 80 and 80, 80 and 70, something like that. It's just that I mentioned before, I have this buddy, Dean Phillips, who is in Congress. He talked about this angertainment industry aspect of it. And
Mhm.
that angertainment, the social media, the cable news networks, AM radio, they do a really good job of figuring out where we do have differences and kind of cut salt and put pressure on. And our district's about 25% Latino. We have young people, we have old people who are asking me, like, what do the Latinos think? What do the older people think? They think the same as the Democrats, Republicans. People are exhausted with national politics. They want people to focus on what I'm hearing from liberals is not what the liberals in DC are talking about. The conservatives I'm talking to, they're frustrated what the conservatives are talking about. They want to go back to those really kitchen table issues that are really serious, like the cost of living is spinning out of control. We have to figure out about the cost of goods, the cost of eggs, the cost of childcare, healthcare, education. There's conversations about clean water, clean air, good schools, economic opportunity. There are a lot of stuff out there. The other thing I've learned is we have 64 counties in our country, and I represent pretty much mostly rural ones. I look at it more like producing counties, if you will.
Mhm.
And whether you're liberal or moderate or conservative, everyone's kind of frustrated at the great state of Denver, as we call it, not Colorado, just that there seems to be a disconnect from a very democratic state party in Colorado state capital, not really listening to anybody that is producing steel in Pueblo, Colorado, producing energy in the western slope of Colorado, and producing potatoes and beef and corn and wheat and barley. And that's what
Well,
I'm hearing.
your governor is a longtime reader of Political Wire and may very well be on this call. Who knows? Maybe he's got
Yeah,
other things to
I
do,
wouldn't be
but
surprised. He's a big listener.
so I'm curious though, in the 2 years, well, you've been running for more than 2 years, really,
Yeah.
but from 2022 to now, have you noticed, has there been a shift in the focus on the issues that people care about most? Or you were
Well, I mean,
running
I think
against
there's
Lauren Boebert, obviously,
yeah,
so.
and so yeah, as you pointed out last time, the Democrats didn't return my phone calls. The Republicans blew me off. It took my mom 6 times for me to call her to return the phone call as well that I was going to run. We were supposed to lose by 40,000 votes per 538, and we ended up losing by 546 or something like that. Um, I would say a couple of things. The cost of living was pretty bad a couple of years ago, but in the past year and a half, that's kind of just a higher conversation. That's a bucket. Um, until about a year ago, I would say the immigration conversation was in two buckets, which are related but not really related. There's a border conversation, and then there's the 12 or 13 million people that are here in our country conversation, dreamers and DACA, and making sure that they're economically part of our community and spiritually part of our community. We're going to school with a lot of these people. The community, we're in church with them as well. Obviously, I would say over the past 5 or 6, 7 months, the conversation is bordered, and it's about securing the border. A lot of our people in our district, ranching, ag, farming, hospitality, medical services, recreation. Everyone understands how important it is to have those communities, whether they're seasonal or full-time, that they need to be part of our economic workforce as well as our community. And so people want the border fixed. They don't want it closed. But there's no space or time for the conversation about dreamers and DACAs and onboarding and that type of further integration until this border starts to get more secure. And I'm hearing that from a variety of political viewpoints. It's a crisis on the border. It's a humanitarian crisis without a doubt, but it's a
Mhm.
multifaceted crisis as well, Taegan.
So your district is not the one type of district where you could probably knock on doors, but if you're going to diners or you're stopping at a place where people are just congregating and you are campaigning, is that the bigger issue right now? Is the border the bigger
Yeah, no,
issue
and
than
so
cost of living?
we do a little bit of door knocking, but it's with sincerity, but it's really not the focus because we have 50,000 miles and we just don't have, we have a handful of cities. We have 250,000 person cities. The third largest city is 20,000 people. And so it gets very small, very rural, very remote, hence the miles we racked up on our pickup truck. And so the diners and speaking at kind of chamber of commerces, which are my favorite type of conversations, kind of civic and business leaders, moderate, I will tell you the vast majority of people are exhausted with politics and they want people speaking between the two 40-yard lines. They kind of want this pro-normal coalition and they're really, really focused on that. And so, yeah, when I'm out there kind of in the retail politic conversation, there is a conversation overall that a lot of people in the rural parts of the country just feel left out of the conversation, whether it's out of DC or whether it's out of our own state capital. And that is something, and I'm pretty sure the people up in upstate New York might feel different than they do in Westchester, or they do in Long Island, and certainly than they do in the city. And when it comes, rural healthcare is a big conversation for us. And I tell people we have more in common with rural Tennessee than we do with Denver or Fort Collins. And I'm very, very focused on the regional issues of national issues, the rural aspects of healthcare, the rural aspects of education funding. And that's why I think we've been fairly effective, because we're focusing on what people in our district are concerned about, not kind of what the talking points of either political party are talking about.
So I love the way you term this, like the pro-normal coalition
Yeah.
that you're talking about. So obviously, I don't want to talk a lot about the past, but you did run against one of these angertainment type candidates in
Yeah.
my district. When we met a few weeks ago, that we have a Democratic primary going on where Jamal Bowman, who some would say is on the angertainment side of the Democratic Party, and a guy named George Latimer who's challenging him in a primary. I saw him over the weekend, and George said exactly that. He literally said, I'm just a normal guy running who just wants to get back to actually working on the people's business. He talked about how, look, I'm a white guy, but at least he says, I can understand what other people are thinking. I'm not a woman, I can't be pregnant, but I can understand what it must be like for her if she has an unwanted pregnancy and the pressures that she has. And I thought that was a really interesting way to put it. What do you make of this environment that we have? We have Marjorie Taylor Greene, we have Lauren Boebert. Lauren Boebert may actually survive. She may actually serve in Congress with you if you win, which would be, I think, interesting just in and of
I was
itself.
asked that, like the media asked me a couple months ago, and like, that was never really part of my strategy when I started to get into this conversation. But as long as she's focused on Colorado issues, I'll work with her. If she's on the entertainment circuit, then I'm not going to spend any time with her. Quite the opposite. I want to be careful about getting involved in other people's primaries, and I haven't met Representative Bowman, but let me just say I'm a big fan of George. Yes, I think a lot of people forget that the vast majority of the country is between the two 40-yard lines, and I mean that sincerely, and you hear that. And the vast majority of the country is really not political. They don't look at politicians and leaders in a completely political framework. They're looking for people to, like, hey, do you have some type of value system that kind of that works with me? And or do you at least understand with sincerity where I'm coming from and what I want to do? And I think those that are on whether they're on the 48-yard line of either side, I think they end up doing a better job. And you really need to know where you are. One of the things I realized that got me to run, started thinking about this in the fall of 21, is I looked at Marjorie Taylor Greene, Jim Jordan, Matt Gaetz, and Paul Gosar. And you could also put Omar and Talib if you want in that conversation. Clear case of different levels of extremism. Having said that, Boebert was the only one she only won by 10 points. And everyone else is in districts by 30 or 40, 50 points. And Representative Boebert was running around in a plus 10 district thinking that she was plus 30 like Marjorie Taylor Greene. And I just knew that if a conservative, moderate Democrat could get by the primary Democratic, which wasn't easy, but we did it, I won by 300 votes, I could build this pro-normal party coalition. And we worked very, very hard running around. This is not about Team Democrat and Team Republican. It's about Team CD3 and rural aspects and everything else. And so to George and everyone else that is focusing on what people are talking about, not just what's on MSNBC or Fox News, that is where a lot of people are. The problem is 85% of our districts, as you know better than I do, are pretty much cooked at the primary level. And so you have these people that are running, either they truly believe the far part of their party, or they run there, then they try to come back. And I don't have that gene. I just tell people what I tell people in Durango and in Telluride, which are 85% Dem. I tell them the exact same conversation in Rangeley, in Meeker, Colorado, which are 85% Republican. And people are dying for authenticity and sincerity. And it seems to me that George comes off like a sincere, authentic person.
I've known him for 20 years. He's certainly an interesting guy and a good public servant in where he serves. So it'll be interesting to see, because his primary is June 25th. It's the same day that
Yeah, I
the
think Colorado and New York are
Republicans.
the same.
Exactly. So you've got, so Lauren Boebert has now moved to another district. When you launched your campaign against her, thinking you would face her. When did you catch wind that she might move to Ken Buck's district?
So I don't know, mid-afternoon on end of December, the 27th or something like that, I got a phone call from someone on our staff that actually is a lifelong Republican and has worked for Republicans in the state and came over to work with us because she's part of this pro-normal coalition. And she said, Adam, I have this crazy rumor mill. And it's that Boebert is not only going to leave the district, but she's going to go run in Ken Buck's district. And and now, so that was a surprise. And I'm like, well, your tagline over there is like the only thing worse than an embarrassing, ineffectual congressperson is a carpetbagging, ineffectual, embarrassing congressperson. Um, and I do know that in mid-December, 2 weeks before she bailed, and I think she's like the first person in 25 years to actually bail on a district that had nothing to do whatsoever with redistricting. She did some polling, and I know that what she asked because two of my friends were asked. And the question was, she was going to have a harder primary, but she was going to win the primary. She did some polling about how effective she was after her 3 years of entertainment and the Beetlejuice conversation. And I don't know what the results were technically, but I would imagine she was down by more than 3, 4, or 5 points to really figure out how she can come back. And so she literally packed up her bags, her tail between her legs, and ran over there. And we'll have to see. I spent a little bit of time watching over there. There are 3 or 4 moderate Republicans over there, pro-normal Republicans, if you will. The question is, can they all rally around one of them to kind of, I assume she's going to get 30 to 35%. And Colorado does not have majority wins. It's the plurality conversation. So we'll have to see. I mean, I need to focus on my race. I've tried to, exude some support over there a little bit, but I got to focus on what Western and Southern Colorado do. And that's where my heart lies, and that's where my geography lies. And I'm able to make pledges that I will never, ever, ever bail on CD3, no matter what happens in this race, to go elsewhere to look out. I never planned on running for Congress. My 8 years on city council, like my wife's 4 years on the school board, that's elected community service. This is a whole different ball of wax, but the representative made some comments in the summer and fall of 21, as I tell people, don't ask me what they were. I don't remember, but they were on brand. And that got me thinking, like, can a moderate conservative Democrat build a coalition to take on what was kind of an abnormal current congressperson.
So you did take advantage of the fact that you were running against her, at least for a few months there, and you built a pretty considerable war chest. I think you've raised more than all of the Republicans who are running in this June 25th primary combined. So, I think that's probably, if I were to guess, I can't read Lauren Boebert's mind, thank goodness. But if I could, I could imagine she looked at that, like she's going to have a tough race. You raised a ton of money. Has your fundraising continued, at a healthy pace, in a district that all could be extremely winnable, or it could be a very close race?
Yeah, it's going to be a close race, and I'll get fired by my finance people if I say we need more money, and we need more money. We have 4 media markets we have to advertise on, which is a lot. We have Denver and Colorado Springs for Pueblo and Grand Junction, and actually we have to advertise in Albuquerque, New Mexico. But yes, no, listen, we're going to show. She ran away because of the numbers, the polling numbers, as well as the fundraising. But I'll tell you, our average donation is $28. She helped us generate 350,000 different donations out there,
Wow,
right? So
that's amazing.
And again, that average donation is $28, but there's going to be a lot of outside money, PAC money, Southside money, whatever term you want to use for you, the depth of your political insiderness for your viewership. And so we'll have to see. So we're just trying to build our war chest. We are going to show up with some amount of $4 or $5 million at the end of the primary to go into the general election, which will be very helpful for us. And but at the end of the day, the money is a tool to get to the goal, and the goal is getting votes. And we're getting goals. Our votes are coming from 50,000 miles of being on the road and really, really connecting with people. And that's what's really, really good. Every time a Republican's raising more money than the Democrat is accusing the Republican of trying to buy the election. And every time a Republican is not making as much money as the Democrat, guess what the Republican says? They're trying to buy the election. And so no matter what happens, it goes out there. And the studies show, yes, money is helpful. It doesn't bail out a bad candidate. And with all due respect, I'm a pretty humble dad. We're not a bad candidate. We know how to run a campaign. Both my wife and I have a pretty strong track record in business and nonprofit in kind of community service stuff. And so we'll run a good campaign. We'll be doing door knocking. We have a lot of volunteers. But it's going to be a close race. I mean, Trump's going to win this district by 5 or 6 points. I mean, it's hard to talk about Trump Frisch voters, but they're out there. But I will tell you, speaking of Governor Polis, he won this district by 2 points. Michael Bennett lost this district by only 1 point. And Colorado at the state level has a huge reproductive right abortion protection ballot initiative coming up in November. And not only is it great policy, but it's going to be great for getting out the vote. And I will tell you, all of the vast majority of our conservative friends out here, it's much more of a libertarian conversation than it is if we were down in Mississippi or Alabama running. They don't want you in their bedroom. They don't care what you do in your bedroom. They want to be left alone. And they do not want government mandated pregnancies. They do not want government mandated family planning. And they might have their own views about abortion for themselves. Usually that changes as soon as their wife or their daughter or their niece ends up getting pregnant. But they really are kind of it's like, as my daughter calls it, the UBU party. And they just want to be left alone. And we're there to honor that and continue to focus on what the men and the women and the families and the small businesses care about in Western and Southern Colorado.
So when you were in New York, you met my wife, who was also a politician. She ran for city council in Rye, and George Latimer actually gave her advice when she ran, which was to be relentless, knock on every door you can, talk to every single person you can. And he said, write them a thank you note after you're done. Now, you can do that in our nice little city of Rye. Little bit harder in your district, but it sounds like you're taking the same approach in terms of just trying to meet as many people as you can.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. I mean, if the Democratic Party was writing, and George and I can probably talk about this, if the Democratic Party was writing, what do you want a profile of a candidate to be? It might not be a fairly successful, straight, middle-aged white guy from a mountain town. But I own that, and I said that to the Democratic primary people all the time, and they appreciated me owning up to it. But I said, listen, the district's 22% Democrat, and as I said before, we need to build a coalition to be able to do this. And the other thing is, once I got over that, the skepticism in rural America of a mountain town, let alone of where I'm living now, even though I grew up on an Indian reservation, and my dad grew up in a mining town in Minnesota, my mom's grandfather was a cattleman, and my cousin runs the grain elevator up in Esco, Minnesota. The skepticism is there, and so I knew I had to get on the road, and that's why I've been on the road so long, letting him know that I'm a real person that truly relates to where a lot of people are, and I show up. I mean, that's if the tagline of my campaign is I show up, and I'm showing up at conferences where a Democrat has never gone to, let alone give the opening address to the Western National Mining Association in Grand Junction about how important domestic energy is. There's a global climate crisis without a doubt, but we also need to be realistic about the math behind that. And so effort matters a tremendous amount, as George wisely mentioned to your family. And so, yes, it's a bigger scale than city council, but when you live in a pretty rural community, you basically, yes, this is a congressional district. Yes, it's 50,000 square miles. Yes, there's 700,000 people here. But even our 250,000 person towns, they go back and forth between they live in a big small town or a small big town, and everybody talks. And getting out there is really, really, really important.
Well, it worked for Sarah. She got more votes than anybody in the history of our town, more than George when he ran. And it was literally that type of advice that it is because you can't be everywhere, but people do talk to other people. And so if there's that personal connection that you can make, it really has a multiplier effect. And so there's really, we've seen many, many people in our area and in other areas who don't put in the work. And if you don't put in the work,
Yeah.
you know, you don't have the shot. You know, particularly in a district that leans Republican like yours, it's going to be a little bit harder. So you're facing, there's a Republican primary in a couple of weeks, and 2 weeks from tomorrow, and
Yeah.
you have is there 5 Republicans running, I think?
There's 6 Republicans running.
Six.
And I would say there's a variety of flavors. You have everything from pretty extreme, and a gentleman that was at the U.S. Capitol ran for U.S. Senate in 2022. Very proud to make an ad. He found some old Xerox copy machines, those 4-foot big copy machines, and he wrote the voting machine on them. And then he pulled out his gun and then he shot him up. And that was his television ad. And you can see that on YouTube. And then we have, a quasi-normal Republican who, I will give him credit for being a good father and a good husband, but courage is the #1 trait that Winston Churchill and I agree on that you need in this conversation. And he has skipped 6 out of the 7 Republican candidate forums, and he doesn't return the calls to press, and he talks about the scheduling conflicts all the time. And I'm like, he needs a new scheduler because he does not seem to be able to show up where the voters want him to show up. And if you can't show up, then I think you're kind of almost disqualified for running, but he's obviously hiding from people. So we're not sure. On one hand, he's backed by the establishment. On the other hand, there's not a lot of Mitt Romney showing up in Republican primaries these days. So on one hand, it doesn't really change it doesn't change my views. It doesn't change our message. It doesn't change how many thousands of miles I'm going to be driving around, and a lot with my son Felix, and a little bit some with my wife Katie. And if I can get my to be 17-year-old daughter who just finished her junior year of high school out here on the road, we'll be on the road a lot. And that's, you win it in the dirt. And that's what you've learned about running around there and getting over the skepticism of a non-Republican in a rural district.
So you're saying that your strategy is pretty much no different regardless who wins the GOP nomination?
Yeah, I mean, one of the good things about Representative Bobart leaving is that we've always wanted to tell why people should be voting for us and not against other people. Right. And that got lost in the shuffle, not because we were spending time attacking Bobart personally, policy wise, yes, up and down, but there was so much national money that came into our race last year and the start of this year. And I would say either unproductive or counterproductive in the message that we want to get out there. Talking about our family and being a mom, and that's just not who I am, and that I think it's counterproductive. We want to be very focused about that, and so that burden is off our shoulders, so we can do well. And you asked about the money. She made a video that's out there somewhere saying, "Oh, now that I'm gone, now that Lauren Boebert's gone, no one's going to be able to raise any money." And I think we raised 4 times as much money than she did after she was already gone. So we do have the ability, we're raising money because we're successful. We're not successful because we're raising a lot of money. People realize, mostly in the state, that I have a message that relates to a lot of different people. And we came so close last time. They see how hard we're working. And that's being rewarded from, this $28 average donation. We can take more. $8 is our average.
So tell me a little bit more. I'll be honest with you. I'm having a hard time understanding who the Trump Frisch voter is. So if Trump's going to win your district by 5 or 6 percentage points, what's the profile of that person?
So you look at a real quick thing. There are 5 current Democrats in Trump districts: Jared Golden in Maine and Marie Guzman-Perez, and these are kind of my kindred spirits, Mary Patola in Alaska. And you have 18 Republicans in Biden districts right now. And a good chunk of them are in New York, sorry to say, right? And so, there are people, there's a couple of people. There's a group of people that want Trump there, but they want to check on him. There's some of that to actually think about that. There are people that just are frustrated with the White House or with Biden, but they've spent a lot of time with me and they see that I am a real person with a real family and has had real success in business and a straight shooter. And they like that. Again, so there's a variety of people, why people vote that way, and they like the pro-normal, but they're frustrated at a national level a lot of time with the Republican Party, or they used to be, Trump has attracted a lot of former Democrats, right? And that's a whole nother conversation, which I'm happy to have, but I know we don't have that much time. And so, I'll also say this. There are people that vote for Trump because of who he is. And I don't spend any time with those, but there are people that vote for Trump in spite of who he is. And I think in the back of my mind, not strategically, those are the people I come across. These are Chamber of Commerce people that have business leadership responsibilities or civic leader responsibilities. And they're still part of the old school Republican Party. With Mitt Romney, John McCain, bless his soul, Ronald Reagan. And then you also have that they see someone and they built up a personal relationship with somebody, and they know that I'm a sincere person, and I'm not going to get sucked into party politics. I'm going to focus on what matters to the men and the women and the businesses and the families of Colorado's Western Slope and Southern Colorado. And we've built this trust, and trust is underappreciated and underrated in politics, even at a national level.
So we don't have that much time left, but I wanted to talk to you. You mentioned it briefly about abortion rights. You are very much in favor of abortion rights. There is a ballot measure in Colorado in November. What we've seen since the repeal of Roe v. Wade has been in virtually every election that has made a big difference. It has actually made a difference, averaging about 6 or 7 points, which would be enough to flip your district just on that basis. Do you think that will be a big issue in November? We're as we move, a couple of years away from the Supreme Court's decision.
Yeah. And it's not just from a belief. I will tell you the personal story. I was born on an Indian reservation, so my dad worked in the Indian Health Service for 5 years. And then he ended up becoming an OBGYN, opened up a women's clinic in Minneapolis. And there aren't that many people that are either running or serving in Congress that actually had death threats and bomb threats at their house and at their father's office or their parents' office. And he worked for Planned Parenthood the last couple of years of his career. He's still around, but he's retired. And I have 3 younger sisters. The younger sister is an OBGYN. And so, I am all in personally and professionally and politically on making sure that the government and politicians are not getting involved in the decision that should be between a woman and her healthcare provider and whoever else she wants in that room. And if she wants politicians in a room, that's up to her, but it's not up to me to instill that. And, the fact that Kansas a year and a half ago or 2 years ago was able to support a Healthcare Freedom Act by 18 points, not just 3, bodes well for Colorado, because the western part of Southern Colorado is a lot more, again, like Kansas, if you will. And it truly is a choice conversation. It's not about being pro-abortion. It is about pro-leave me alone and pro-let me make my own decisions. And that resonates with a good amount of the people in our district.
Adam, it's super nice to be able to chat with you at length and to find out a little bit more about how you view this race. I know you're not going to take a break, but you've got 2 weeks before your opponent's there, and good luck to you.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. And we appreciate everything else like that. And we're super excited to stay involved. And I'm a big fan of everything you do.
Great. Thank you so much, Adam.
Take care.
Bye-bye.